everybody, welcome back to the PK Natural Bees channel. Today is October 3rd, I think, and I'm doing pre-winter inspections. I'm a little bit disappointed so far. I've gotten into 6 colonies, and I think 4 of them need a lot of weight put on. I've been open feeding, and I think the strongest colonies really are beating out the weak ones because they really didn't put on much weight at all. And the strongest colonies didn't even really need the food because of how much was left with them, and so that was an error on my part that I'm going to have to rectify between now and when it gets colder, because it's already getting down there at night, and they're clustered more and more throughout the day, and at some point it's not going to be feasible to feed them any liquid, and I'd like for them to get it packed in before then. But I'm going to get into this one and do my pre-winter inspection and talk about the points that I look for. I'll tell you right now, the points that I look for are the amount of bees, the amount of food, and the queen's status. Is it queen right, number one, and how much has she slowed down in comparison to the other hives out here. The one that I just got into right here, I mean, she's rocking. There's most of the frames are still, holding a good pattern from front to back and top to bottom, which in a lot of the other hives, the patterns are shrinking. And for good reason, because they're filling it in with syrup and the available space is becoming lessened. But the queen senses the fact that, once again, we're clustered more and more throughout the day, and all that brood needs to be covered in the cluster in order for it to be able to be warm enough until a viable bee pops out of the cell. So in order to accommodate the size of the cluster, they slow down gradually, and you can see that at this time of year. But since we are beekeepers and not Mother Nature, what we'd like to see are big, wide brood patterns. I mean, we can rectify the lack of food, like I just talked about. It's unfortunate that I have to, but you can rectify that by spot feeding individual hives rather than communal feeding. But you can't do anything about the amount of bees unless you're going to combine. So you just really want to see out of your queen that she's laying it up until the last minute. Worst case scenario is that some brood dies and gets pulled out, and big deal. But when that doesn't happen, more bees get hatched, and you go into winter with a stronger colony. So, all right, I'll quit blabbing, and I'm going to get into this hive right now and check on what I've been checking on. I expect to see a lot of bees and a lot of food in this one. Sound you want to make when you're getting into your beehive. I have upper entrance shims that have yet to be put together. Because they will have an upper entrance shim right here, and then the inner cover on top of that for ventilation, and an exit point that won't get blocked throughout the winter. Alright, so this box is mostly honey. I'm going to pick it up for 2 reasons. 1, to judge how much honey, and 2, to get into the brood area to assess well, it's considerable. So is down here. This is the reason why I'm going to stop open feeding today, because this hive is jam-packed with food. The propolis is stronger as the temperatures drop. It's tough to do a quick inspection when each frame is so thoroughly cemented. So yeah, and some of the earlier ones I've combined, or I mean condensed. It's a nice frame of honey right there. Condensed them down to a box, because there's no point in leaving extra space. Wow, this hive has a lot of honey. It's another full frame. That's another pretty full frame. I might just end up taking that top box and passing it out to some of the weaker ones. Here's some brood and a queen. Alright. Hopefully you can see her there. If not, I'll help you. There she is. Big bright dot on her. She is about 18 months old. And she's still rocking it up. I'm very happy with that. Birds of a feather may live together, but the ugliest ones are the green. Sorry, singing Jack White. Alright. Now for purposes of knowing whether I can take all this honey here and pass it out to some of the weaker ones or not, I'm going to pop into the bottom box very briefly. Nope. Nope, that bottom box is light. That box is heavy. And this box is pretty heavy. But there are a lot of bees, so I'm not going to take anything from them. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my makeshift note log because I lost my booklet and mark all that information down. I will transfer it to the booklet when I find that. I mean, hopefully I'll find it. Either way, I want to have all this documented, not only for spring, purposes, say that it was a strong colony going into winter, and then also it's a strong colony coming out of winter, and it's, a pretty good loss ratio and all that kind of stuff, the analytics that you'll do with it later on, but also for immediate purposes, which ones need food, which ones could use an extra, empty frame for stuff, or could use some type of pollen supplement, although I don't plan on doing any pollen feeding right now. That'll be in the spring. But Either way, though, so it's just good to document. I know this is far from scientific, but it's good enough for my purposes. 7 bees on a scale of 1 to 10. I'll give it a 10. Food on that same scale, I will give a 9. Queen, right? Yes. Looks great. Alright, so, I mean, everybody has their own version, their own shorthand of how they document things. I'm fairly verbal with it. The only real things that I shorten or make easier to write are things that get written every single time. But either way, so I'm going to, regardless of that, I'm going to continue on through my pre-winter inspections, and then the next step for winter preparation will be spot feeding, which will probably entail me feeding maybe an entire 5-gallon bucket to some of these. If they have enough empty space, I'll just put a 5-gallon bucket on top of the frames inside a hive, put a couple of hive bodies around it, and wait until they transfer it to the cells. I have 3-gallon buckets as well. That might be a little bit more feasible. Either way, I'm going to feed a lot to these hives that need it. And then in November, I will make and distribute sugar bricks for each hive, regardless of how much food they have. And I will put the upper entrance shims on each one that doesn't have one, and moisture boards as well. So I don't wrap the hives, I don't cover them or anything like that. I've got a really nice windbreak surrounding like 3 sides of it, and I've been having some fairly decent success. I'm trying to increase those numbers, of course, and like I said, I was a little disappointed with today's inspections, but nothing a little diligence can't take care of. So, as I always say, thank you very much for watching. If you like these videos, you want to see more, click subscribe or click like or whatever you feel like doing. Either way, get out there and make sure your bees are ready for winter. I think it might be a long one. Have fun.